Now we transition into a series of engaging panel discussions that will bring together global leaders, innovators, and policymakers to explore the future of life sciences and healthcare. So our first panel discusses the shifting role of global capability centers in life sciences from traditional cost-saving models to value-driven innovation hubs. With an increasing focus on AI, digital transformation, and R&D, GCCs are now playing a crucial role in shaping the global healthcare industry. To guide this discussion, we are pleased to welcome our moderator for this session, Dr. Purav Gandhi, founder and CEO, HealthArk, to please join us on stage. I will also take this opportunity and call our esteemed panelists for this discussion, Mr. John Dawber, Corporate Vice President and Managing Director, Global Business Services, Novo Nordisk, Mr. Siva Kumar Padmanabhan, MD and Head of Global Innovation Technology Center, AstraZeneca India, to please join us, along with Mr. Mohit Dhingra, Managing Director and Head of Business Insights and Technology, Hyderabad BMS. Mr. Phani Mitra, B, Global CIO and CDO, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Mr. Puneet Chopra, Head of Data, Digital and Technology, Takeda. And Mr. Rajiv Onat, India Head, Digital Technology and Engineering, Regeneron. As our panelists are right here, before we begin, we are honored to release the white paper by HealthArk titled Expanding Horizons, the Maturity Journey of Life Sciences and Healthcare GCCs in India. And to do the honors, we have with us a vibrant personality, Mr. Sudeep Krishna, co-founder and president of HealthArk. Let us do the unveiling first, ladies and gentlemen. Let us capture this moment with one photograph. Post which I humbly request Mr. Sudeep, if you would like to share a few words about the expanding horizon and the maturity journey of life sciences and healthcare. GCCs in India. Over to you, Sudeep.
Thank you, Sabrina. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here and to introduce this session. We start our POV with a quote. We say that the difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. And in many ways, that quote epitomizes the approach that, or the GCC journeys that a lot of life sciences companies have taken over the last few years. Look, we are consultants and we love 2x2s. And every time we have worked with GCCs and looked at helping them with their GCC journeys, in many cases you typically start with the processes or the functions that are less complex and that are non-core. But in life sciences, in our experience, it's the other way around. In many cases, we not only look at optimizing costs as we go along in these GCC journeys, we also look at maximizing values. So it's an honor to have all these GCC leaders from 3 different cities here, actually, from Chennai, Bangalore, and Hyderabad. And in many ways, these three cities form the core of the entire life sciences GCC ecosystem in India. We have Siva from AstraZeneca, John from Novo Nordisk, Puneet from Takeda, Mohit from BMS, and very excitingly, we also have Phani from Dr. Reddy's, where we'd love to hear his perspectives on how Indian life sciences companies are thinking about GCCs going forward. So with that, I would love to hand over to our moderator for the session, Dr. Purav Gandhi, founder and CEO of HealthArk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudeep, for setting the tone for this exciting discussion. I'll start with local first. Mohit, almost exactly a year, last BioAsia was the time when we inaugurated the BMS GCC. Probably 6 months ago you started, before that you started hiring your team, and now such a rapid pace, you've built a team of 2,000 plus in India. Wanted to hear about this journey, like how such a rapid journey was undertaken, what was the experience, how did you get adoption within your global team as the center grew at this rapid pace?
Sure. So firstly, Bristol Myers Squibb is in the bold science business, right? And we're looking at disease areas which we have to bring treatments to the centers very fast, right? So one important piece for us is how do we build a workforce that is very innovative and has a sense of urgency? And that's why we chose Hyderabad as a location to build that capability a year and a half ago. So if you really look at it in the last 18 to 20 months, we have now 2,000 people in Hyderabad, thanks to the ecosystem that is available in Telangana for us to do that. I think it started off with a very simple, I call it the vision and the broad core guiding principles. And I think we were very clear on what we wanted to build was a very cross-functional, innovative, a workforce that has a sense of urgency, because there are a lot of patients who are waiting for our medicines every day, right? And every day's delay really costs lives at the end of the day. And I think as part of the guiding principles, what was very important to also say what we should not be doing, because everybody gets caught up in this, I call it the value versus volume game, right? So we were very clear that we are here for value and we are not here for volume, because very soon you will see everybody gets into the thousands and the 10,000s and you figure out that, hey, am I really doing the right work that I should be doing or not, right? And that's very keen to the topic of what we've got here. So we were a bit more surgical in the value part of it. One thing we wanted also to make sure is value is a very broad spectrum, right? Because it can start off with automating and eliminating certain manual activities to breakthrough innovation, right? So from that spectrum perspective, where do you play to that spectrum is very important. And I think what led to us having a very simple principle was, guys, we play to that spectrum that adds value to the company's goals and aspirations. That's period, because we are here to serve the company, right? And I think 3-4 things got us there very quickly. One is we are very open that if we're going to be innovative, we have to get a workforce that comes from diverse backgrounds and industry. And there is this little bit of this in life sciences, that you really have to be in the life sciences to be in the life sciences. I think we were able to successfully break that myth. We said, guys, we are open, we want to be innovative, and we can only get it when people come from different industries and backgrounds and different experiences. So I think that helped us move faster. And of course, where we wanted the specialists to come in with the science background, we took the folks from that background, right? The second piece that really was very well aligned to us was that we had a very clear sponsorship at the C-suite level. Even our leaders report into the C-suite right now. And the C-suite was very enabling to clear out any roadblocks, right? Because that really helps to move fast, because you can't move fast without that sponsorship and support. And I think the C-suite was very supportive to also give the, what I call it, the empowerment, the autonomy for us to make that decision, and the trust that was built very soon. And that's how we were able to move pretty quickly to it. And I think that alignment also brings in very clear global objectives of what needs to get delivered. Last point I'll make is, I think we call this a very clear one BMS culture. At the end of the day, it's one organization that needs to operate the same way. And the one BMS culture only comes with the people, so making that investment day in, day out with the people, with the leadership to set that stage was very critical. So I think those are few pieces that really helped us move fast.
No, it's incredible. It's a fascinating journey, and I'm sure you have plans to continue this further as well. But there was one distinct advantage, Mohit, you had, which was you were starting with a clean slate. I want to go to John. John, for you, it was a very unique story, right? You were here for almost what we talked about, 17 years. But then the journey is in 2 phases. It started 17 years ago, and then last 3 or 4 years, there's a very different momentum. The role of the GCC changed significantly. You talked about the culture changing, the kind of roles and seniority changing. So how did you go about this transition? what was the difference in mandate, difference in positioning of the GCC?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning. So Novo Nordisk in Bangalore now is just a little shy of 4,500 colleagues across about 17 functions. I was thinking actually, we've heard a lot over the last 2 days. 7 out of the top 10 global pharma companies are based here in Hyderabad. Probably the remaining 3 are amongst the 6 of us. So we've all got targets on our chests, ladies and gentlemen. But Novo Nordisk started in Bangalore 17 years ago, and we started as a shared service center, as a transactional business. But in the last, as you say, 3-4 years, we've grown by about 2,000 colleagues. And now, if I stratify our workforce into what you might think as transactional roles versus specialist or senior roles, we're now approaching 70-30 in favor of the senior or specialist roles. And so for every one transactional person we've hired in the last 3 years, we've hired 3 specialists or senior folk. So the whole journey's been quite interesting. If I think about some of the challenges that we've faced, I probably split them into 2 halves. First of all, externally, everybody knows a little bit about Novo Nordisk now, but perhaps 3-4 years ago they didn't. So we had to do quite a lot of work on external branding, on communication, on being sure that the external world understood who we were, our purpose, focus on patients, focus on why we exist. The other thing that we had to do was completely change the way we do our talent attraction model, because no longer can we just run a very simple RPO model that just churns in transactional folk every week, but rather we have to have our talent attraction people very focused on understanding more deeply the roles that we've got and the value that we bring. If I think about internal development, one of the differences perhaps from Mohit, whilst we do have full C-suite sponsorship, we've had to build a lot of trust along the way. And having all of those 17 functions, SVPs, trusting in what we do, trusting in what we deliver, not over-promising and under-delivering, but rather being sure that we deliver what we say we can deliver and then grow from there has been really, really important for us. We constantly rolling out the red carpet and bringing folks to Bangalore, as I'm sure these guys also do. And that helps us build the trust with the HQ stakeholders, and everybody has seen the value that our organization can deliver. And as I close, perhaps there is a little uniqueness about Novo Nordisk in so much as we're a Danish-based company. The entire population of Denmark is about 1/3 of the population of Bangalore. So as this company scales and scales and scales, we had to look for skills and scale outside our home country. And we're super happy with what we have in India and continue to grow here.
That's great to hear, John. Siva, I'll come to you. You have had a fairly long run, and we were talking about how there's a transition that you have led AZ through from the GCC being a service or a product delivery organization to almost being clearly linked to business outcomes, being responsible for business outcomes. How do you do that sitting in India? How could you make that transition happen? How could you drive that change? If you can tell us about that process, because that's what I think now every GCC aspires for, right? To be responsible directly for a business outcome.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm Siva Padmanabhan from AstraZeneca. We've been here 10 years, like you said, Purav. in India. And I would say it's been a process of maturing, right? Where initially, if I would equate this to like Lego blocks, initially you have these service or technology platforms or product teams that are very focused on making sure that you have a good Lego block, right? To what John also said, which is, can it be trusted? Is it something that will hold up, when faced with, turbulences and so on? And then I think it was really around the time of COVID that we realized that all of a sudden that all of these capabilities and functions and teams we put here in India can connect and really start to drive something very different. So when we looked at launching products during that period, we realized how all of these capabilities being in the same GCC, or at that time we call it the Global Technology Center, can really connect together and really start to deliver end-to-end value for the company, such as accelerating how we actually are developing and launching new products. That was like an eye-opener, because then we started looking at it not as individual blocks, but as something that can come together to build something more beautiful and bigger, and it can really impact the business. So from there on, I think we have been really now focused on saying, how do we actually look at these teams, not only continuing to deliver for their vertical global organizations, but also how are we going to bring them together in a digital value chain. And one of the things we did at that time was rebrand from a Global Technology Center to a Global Innovation and Technology Center. And that was a very conscious thing to do, which is to say that we're going to now put all the leading new technology COEs in our India GCC first, before we go someplace else, right? So in that sense, we have actually put some more Lego blocks into the mix, if you can think about it as COEs for like virtual and augmented reality, and more recently the COE for generative AI. A lot of those things we added into the mix. So now what we are then seeing is that if you look at things like product launch, or getting into a new therapy area, a new modality like cell and gene therapy, how can we take the capabilities that are in the GCC, weave them together to really create something of value for the enterprise? So that's a big focus now in the evolution of our GITC or a GCC. And that requires, I think as we talked in the previous session, which was a wonderful session, about how do you actually build that mindset to actually be innovative, to be agile, be experimentative, take feedback and change, right? And that's the next part of this journey, is about how do you build that culture of agile experimentation, culture of rapid adoption, which comes from agile experimentation, because if you're doing agile experimentation, you're likely to discover paths that lead to more enhanced or rapid adoption. So that's really where we're going. So that's been kind of the journey, from the Lego blocks to the bigger Lego object that takes up all these blocks.
No, very, very interesting, very interesting. So the transformation, right? I want to use this as an opportunity to go to Puneet. Puneet, we talked about at Takeda, right? Like one of the things to ensure this innovation happens, you have been talking about is the culture that you build in the team, both in terms of consistency and patient centricity. And in some sense, it intuitively makes all the sense. Everyone should do it. And yet it is challenging to build it. Can you talk us through how have you gone about this journey? How has it worked in terms of inspiring people, retaining them?
Yeah, thanks Purav for the question, and BioAsia for the opportunity to be part of this esteemed panel. Before I answer that question, I want to celebrate a monumental achievement, which is that 60% of the GCC in the world, out of the total that we have, 60% of GCC are in India. I think it's a great achievement that requires, a lot of work that has gone, in terms of government, my fellow panelists, and everyone sitting around, right? I think it's a monumental achievement. Coming back to your question, right, let me also, talk a little bit about Takeda values and the ecosystem. So Takeda is a 240-year-old Japanese multinational biopharmaceutical organization. We are into innovative medicines and vaccines. And it's a very interesting story in terms of how we have taken our culture to the next level. When I joined this organization about 2 years back, I was in a meeting and the first thing that I learned about is our PTRB, patient, trust, reputation in business. This is our philosophy. So we start with patient first, look at whether the opportunity is going to create a trust in the organization, how it's going to act from a reputational standpoint, and the business for us comes last. I was fascinated by seeing that kind of approach by an organization, really doing walk the talk. If you look at our values, right, we talk about integrity, honesty, fairness, and perseverance, with integrity at the core. So for us, from a GCC standpoint, it was never a first mover advantage game. We launched our first GCC this year. Yeah, we are late in the game, people might say that, but it was never a first mover advantage for us. For us, it's about doing the right thing the first time. And that's why we have took some years for us to understand what's that model that can really work for Takeda from a cultural standpoint, and how we can build people and talent which can really get integrated into our value system as well as our PTRB approach. So that has been some of our strategies in terms of how we get these people embedded into the business. For me, I am part of the business, right? So not looked upon as a transactional IT resource, rather look as a business enabler. See, transformation always happens top-down, right? And innovation happens, spreads like this. How do we integrate these two approaches to really make a transformation from a scalability standpoint, agility standpoint, speed standpoint? I think Dave also in the previous the session really talked great about mindset. I think you also touched about mindset. I think such an important aspect of having the right mindset, creating digital solutions which can really solve business problems. It's not about putting the cart before the horse, right? And not building solutions and then looking for problems. Rather the other way around, look at the problems and start building solutions who can really solve for those problems. That's the kind of culture and the mindset we are trying to build in our ICC called Innovation Capability Center in Bhartiya City, Bangalore. And I'm really excited to be part of the Hyderabad ecosystem, and looking at the talent here, I think there is an opportunity to scale up our ICCs into beautiful location.
8 out of 10 should we count you in? So jokes aside, I think a very similar question I had for Rajiv as well. Right? Rajiv, when we look at Regeneron's journey, we've talked about complex, cutting-edge work being done out of India in the area of digital transformation. As Regeneron was looking at India, what was the thought process? How did you go about evaluating India as an opportunity, thinking that yes, this is something which can be effectively done in India?
Oh, thanks, Purav, for the question, and it is great to be on this platform, and it's always a great place to be, and every year it gets bigger and brighter, so kudos to the organizers in the state of Telangana for creating this amazing platform. Regeneron, it's a 35 plus year old startup, and that's how we operate. Even though we've been in this business for quite some time, the organization's mindset is very startup mindset. Science is deeply rooted in everything we do, and it's a science-first culture within the organization. Of course, it was founded by George and Len 35 years ago and still founder-led. And that itself says a lot about how we sort of use science to create life-transforming medicines and at the end of the day improve patient outcomes. Regeneron India specifically, was started a couple of years ago. I'm still a rookie compared to some of the panel members here in terms of where we are. So the initial driver for us to establish this site was to really double down on our digital transformation capabilities. So we started thinking about, okay, and there were, and as Mohit said earlier, I think we were also very clear about what the site should not be. In addition to what it should be or what shape it should take, we were also pretty clear what it should not be. We did not want this to be positioned as a cost efficiency outpost. We didn't want to call it, I mean, there are different labels that we give to these sites these days, from captive to ODC to GCC. And I sort of, and our leadership refuses to label the site or pigeonhole ourselves into any of these definitions, to basically consider regional India as an integral part of region run itself, and drive the global vision and be part of those strategic initiatives, right? And that's very fundamental to us. So what that has led us to do is we are pretty measured and intentional in our growth. We are not in the volume business. You know, you're not going to see us go, 1,000 plus, 2,000 plus quickly. We'll get there, but we'll get there in a very intentional way, intentional approach. So in that respect, we started off building computational science capabilities within the site. This is to help our computational science team and various science groups within the organization. And that evolved into other areas of digital transformation in the area of data, to really bring enterprise connected data ecosystem and being able to play a huge role in making sure, as we say, the next drug is in the data. And it's very important to make sure the data is connected and it is accessible in a secure and safe fashion to everybody who want to explore and derive insights out of it. So we moved into data, and then we started expanding into artificial intelligence. I think that topic has been sort of beaten to death in the last couple of days, so I'm not going to sort of dive deep into that area, but that is a critical capability that we also want to build within this group. So once we started demonstrating the value across these key portfolios, then we started expanding into outside technology. And then, the next big leap was to, can we, leverage the clinical trials, or conduct clinical trials in India. And today, I think we are proud to say that we are conducting 3 studies as we speak in rare disease areas. And 10% of the clinical participants globally are from this part of the world. And there is tremendous opportunities in that space. In fact, our disease burden in some of the areas like cancer is so high, but our clinical participation is so low. And that's an area that we can significantly invest and grow. And that's an area we are looking to constantly sort of invest and grow as well. So the bottom line is, or the gist of where I'm going with this is we are pretty intentional in the areas that we want to invest. And we also don't want to dilute the regional way of life, which is to lead with science, take on big ideas, be great together. And there is a way we have shaped that it's easy to acquire talent from outside, but it's a whole different game to make sure that talent understands the purpose and the meaning of why they are part of this larger mission of the organization.
Very interesting, Rajiv. I'll come back to that in the second round of the discussion. I have a follow-on question. But before that, I'd love to come to you, Phani. This is the question I've been holding back for last 3 days. So it makes all the sense for all multinational companies to come to India, take advantage of the opportunity, the talent, the ecosystem we have. But DRL's been here, it's one of those rare MNCs which has grown out of India and gone to the world. you have experienced the ecosystem, you have helped build the ecosystem. So now it's a very interesting and in some sense not a very intuitive idea to think about GCC for a company like DRL. Would love to understand how has that thought evolved at your side? How do you look at it when you think about your future growth?
Sure, and not intending to give FOMO to the rest of the participants, but we have been here for 40 years now in Hyderabad as a company that's born here. So it's a pleasure to see the city grow. It's a pleasure to see the ecosystem grow around us. Without calling it a GCC, Purav, we've been thinking about, it has been very organic for us in terms of how we have always looked at Hyderabad or the larger India setup as an integral part of how our growth story evolved over a period of time. We've called it with different names. We call them global COEs, we call them, GBS, home offices, with different names over the last few years. We've been experimenting with this idea, but primarily for three levers as I look at it. One is the obvious one around efficiency. How do you create efficiency in the overall value chain, because cost is an important factor. Being efficient is a very important part of the business model, so efficiency has always been one of the key drivers. The second lever was for us primarily around new capabilities, because one of the very few countries across the world where you can build a lot of new capabilities with the capacities that you need. So there's a little bit of that trade-off, and so the second key lever for us was capabilities. And the third one is how do you create a without calling it center, which is sitting outside the larger ecosystem, how do you create a very organic, in the value chain, office that kind of caters to these new operating models that we're going after, right? So just to build a little bit on that, when we looked at efficiency, we've been looking at it always, with a frame of what we call internally as the specialization scatter matrix. In that sense, a very highly specialized job, very, very scattered across the globe, for instance, creates these inefficiencies because you have these very few bright people sitting very far away. It creates, they miss out on the economies of scale, they miss out on a lot of things. So it makes sense for us to push them, further into the center, or closer into the center as much as possible. And the low specialization, high scattered jobs have been a no-brainer. Many of the GCCs have started with that first, be it in finance, in HR operations, in the low-end part of the infrastructure, tech operations, etc. We've always seen that happen, as well, right? So in that scatter versus specialization matrix, we've always tried moving left as much as we can to create, less of a scatter, but that obviously creates efficiencies, as we speak. The second part of it is around capabilities. I think some of the folks on the panel were talking about, new areas like omni-channel marketing or digital marketing capabilities. There are a bunch of these new capabilities that probably were not very natural to pharma companies pre-COVID, if you ask me. While every one of us were dabbling with it, it just became a very, very big imperative, probably, pushed a lot through the COVID, right? Be it in deep science, R&D, be it in commercial capabilities, or be it some of the elements around manufacturing, and digitalization around manufacturing, etc. We found a lot of capability-led capacity building as the second big lever, and that has been a big, thought for us as we were evaluating it. And the third one is, particularly for us as a company, we've been moving from being, started in the city as an API company, to moving into formulations and then into specialty products, and now into larger consumer kind of products, as we looked at our recent acquisition from Helion, or our joint venture with Nestle in India and Nestle Health Sciences in India. A lot of this push to the new operating models required us to create a very different kind of thinking to say, how do you create a deep science capability from here, right? That is basically the new operating models require us to think, very, very fresh as well. So these are the three main levers that actually helped us think through this. We have not been formally calling it the GCC. We've managed to, put it together as a cluster of capabilities. But we've actively been thinking about, does it make sense for us to actually call it a GCC and leverage a lot more? Because I think the last point I wanted to make is, when you see, some of the functional processes being outsourced or globalized, there is an inefficiency factor that many of the global MNCs add in. A job that is one job in the US or in the Europe is around 1.7 in India roughly. That's the back of the envelope calculation that many of the companies do. I hope it is not, it's going to go away. But for us, there is an efficiency factor we want to bring in, because if you put the latest technology together along with the centralization, you might actually look for efficiencies than inefficiencies of that you get through lack of collaboration, things like that essentially kind of hang on to the GCCs, unfortunately. So I think that is another area that is interesting for us. So yeah, it's a unique position to be in, and feels good to be there. Yeah.
No, very cool. I think that efficiency angle is very interesting. And strategically, you're based out of Hyderabad, and now the more work comes here, the more efficient it could get technically. So now that we've talked about the journey for different GCCs, right? No GCC conversation is complete without two specific things. One is talent, which all of us are fighting for, and the infrastructure, which helps us drive the progress. I'll start with the talent part first. Puneet, we talked about talent and war for talent. A lot of companies, when they look at India, controversial to say, but would really think about it that, look, we've read in reports that Indian talent is transactional. We teach them how to do this work, then they go away. But at the same time, companies have also made the mistake at times of being transactional themselves. As you started this journey, how did you look at solving that? And did it work?
I think the short answer is, if you treat people as numbers, they will only deliver, maybe not even deliver the numbers. Okay, so that's the short answer. But how we have gone about creating, I talked about PTRB previously, how we have gone about creating an ecosystem which is hovering around our people, patients, people and planet. That has been our approach to everything that we have done transformative at Takeda, right? And how we have dwelled into our projects, how we have integrated the people into the projects is very, very important. So let me again share a story, right? So we were having a very interesting conversation that we need to manufacture medicines, we need to have innovative vaccines and so on and so forth. But I do believe that medicines and vaccines create magic not when they are manufactured, but when they are delivered to the patients. I think that's very, very important. Keeping that in mind and doing everything around it so that the medicines and vaccines get manufactured fast. Firstly, they get discovered fast, they get produced fast or manufactured fast, and then they get delivered fast as well, right? So within that ecosystem, how can we create or identify problems and then create solutions and then integrate our people into solving for the solutions, not the other way around. That has been our approach to, looking at people, rather the other way around, that I probably need a Java developer, or I need a DevOps, I need this, I need cloud. That's fine. But what you need is a talent and a capability to solve for that problem that you have identified, rather than the other way around, that look for this developer and that developer, right? So our approach has been around building capabilities and then getting those capabilities on board and then integrating them into the business, rather than they sitting in silo in whatever location. They could be sitting in Bangalore, they could be sitting in Hyderabad. They don't work like that, right? So you build an ecosystem, and another example for that is all our GCCs, right? We have one in Mexico, we have one in Bratislava, we have one in India, we're going to soon have one in Japan and China, right? Now, if you look at these countries, we are actually covering all the time zones. So we don't want our people to work in night shifts, to work in a siloed approach. Rather, they come as our people, bring in talent and capabilities, and start delivering onto the business problem, rather than being treated as one resource who is sitting in some corner and doing some great Java stuff or a cloud stuff or a DevOps stuff. That's not the approach that Takeda has.
Makes sense. I think capability is definitely one strong component. Over the years, I've seen context is also probably as relevant. And sure, we talked about setting a team which is truly global, sitting here in India, which has context on how to work on a drug launch in Europe or in Africa or in any other part of the world. But it's very easy to say that. How did you make it happen?
I would say that we are still in the journey, right? I mean, no one's cracked it completely, but I think a few principles that we used right from the beginning was the GCC is just a location. So outside branding, we can use GITC or GCC, whatever, but inside the company, it is AstraZeneca India, right? AstraZeneca Chennai. And what that means is any role can be located here in India with any kind of responsibility, global responsibility, and can move around to different hubs as well, right? So that's one of the fundamental aspects of the integrated operating model, which we think has been good for us, has been successful for us. So that, first of all, introduces a sense of ownership and connection between the global function and the teams that are sitting here. So that's really important. And then the second thing is really around how do you think about this as moving from, as here Puneet said, moving from what capability you can build to what outcomes you can deliver. So even when we talk about GCC, I think I'm a little bit ambivalent about is that the right term, because the capability is still talking about building something, but it's not really talking about how are you going to use it, how are you going to deliver for the business. So that's really where I think we are seeing that inflection to say, we not only need to build the capabilities, we need to connect the capabilities together and build outcomes for the business, whether it be speed, whether it be cost, whether it be service, and so on. And to do that, you really need to have the business context. You touched on something that's very, very key. And that comes over time. It doesn't happen overnight. You can teach classes about how clinical trials work or how, cell and gene manufacturing works. But you really need people to be engaged in it. You need people to be engaged in projects to deliver that and be constantly reminded of why they're doing that and what it's achieving for the business. So over time, I think we are getting to a place where there is more connection. So when we ask somebody what they do, rather than talk about just being a Java developer, to take that example, they also need to be able to say in an elevator pitch that I am a Java developer developing the solution for patients in Turkey to be able to, get patient care or patient assistance or whatever. So that needs to be part of the elevator pitch of every single individual in the GCC about not just their capability, but about how they are delivering for the business. So it's a journey. I think as we mature, as we do more work that is actually interconnected, I think people get more aware of what they're doing and be recognized for being aware and being able to talk about the business value. So you just reinforce the right kind of behaviors and the right kind of culture in the company, and that's the journey we are all of us are on, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, indeed. So that's about talent, but just it's a combination of a talent and a location question for you, John, right? One could argue that as you run a center beyond a point, if you are in one location, you might run out of talent which might not just be the right from a capability perspective, but might fit into your culture also. And as an experience of your journey, in your opinion, what's a good inflection point to start thinking about it, to start looking at other locations for a fresh perspective? Does that add value or does that bring in an inefficiency factor? How do you think about it?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting question and of course something that's very much on our minds at the moment. I feel very, very lucky, to be honest. If I listen to my colleagues here and a lot of the things that we're doing in common have really worked very well for us in Bangalore. To the extent that we do have a very happy organization. We've got engagement levels approaching 90%. We've got the best place to work ranked number 1. We've got an attrition which is below 6%. And we're developing people all the time. So then the decision about, well, do I go to another location is a really tough one, because one doesn't want to dilute a very, very nice situation that we've got going in Bangalore. But I think it is inevitable we do need to do that. Actually, last year, sorry, I should say that unlike many of our colleagues here, until March last year, Novo Nordisk only had one GCC in Bangalore. Then in March last year, we opened a very small center in Mexico City, which now has about 150 people. And we now look at, well, what does this global presence need? What does this India presence need? So to specifically answer your question, we are curious about other locations. We are curious about other locations in India. And it's very specific decisions around talent, experience, and talent availability. You know, as I mentioned, we have this very broad organization. We do cover almost the whole value chain. The beautiful presentation from our MSD colleague previously, you know, we're pretty much covering the whole value chain. But there are elements that don't exist in Bangalore, and there are elements that probably would exist somewhere else in India. And that's probably the trigger factor for us to scale elsewhere.
I think makes sense. This I think sets it up perfectly for me to ask the next question to Mohit. Mohit, you've been in Hyderabad for a long time, and now the BMS journey. How does an ecosystem like Hyderabad help companies innovate and grow? Does it really have a large role to play? If yes, in what areas?
Yeah, no, thank you. On a lighter note, you just take people to some other city and then bring them to Hyderabad. The moment they land at the airport, go through the ORR, and 45 minutes you make a decision of being in Hyderabad, right? So I think that works very well to the ecosystem here. But on a serious note, I think there were three important aspects that we were looking at, right? One was very clearly we wanted, especially for the life sciences piece, we wanted a pharma cluster, a life sciences cluster that is not comparable to anywhere else in the world, which is really available in Telangana. So that was one easy check mark to make and say, guys, okay, this is where we can get the talent. One thing I'll add to what the fellow panelists said, there are two important points, right? And I've gone through this a little bit in the BFI sector. I think more people coming into this industry ups the ante from a long-term perspective. And we saw that in BFSI 10 years ago. Today, nobody complains about talent not being available. I think we'll be at that mark in 3 years or 2 years from now, given what the government is doing, bringing in more life sciences, GCCs, and companies over here. So I think in 2 to 3 years, we'll not even ask this question. We'll say, guys, it just works because there are so many people who will come in. The second point I'll make is that post-COVID, you know, a purpose-led workforce, you know, thinking came in. Everybody wanted to start thinking about is, hey, how can I be more purposeful, make an impact of my life through the work that I'm doing, either directly or indirectly, to help the patients? And I think that piece is a little bit underrated. And I see that a lot when we are hiring people from different industries, because we chose to get people from different industries. And one question we would ask them is, hey, why are you coming from some other industry to this? And they said, guys, this is the post-COVID moment kind of created that for them. And I think we as GCCs and employers need to enable those opportunities for them. So the second point I'll make is, first was pharma clusters, life sciences. We've got a great government support. I think from anything you need, you just make a call and things get done in a couple of hours. I don't think it really requires any follow-up. So that just kudos, and that continues even with the new government and the bureaucrats who continue to be there from the very time Telangana ecosystem was built out. The third piece is, you know, where are you going to find this infrastructure anywhere else in the world, right? I think we've got a top infrastructure which is growing at the same pace as the population is growing. We've got great top academics, right? We've got a very warm, welcoming, state and city that embraces people coming from different parts of the country, don't have any language barriers. I think if you just start putting those things into the mix, and of course, not to forget the great food. I think if you put that into the mix, I don't think there's any other place you want to be in. And I think that trifecta works very well, and that amplifies it. And then we've seen that where a lot of the workforce came in from other parts of the country to come in and settle down here for what we build. So I think that's an ecosystem that thrives very well, and kudos to forums like this and the government that's been enabling that throughout. So.
Oh, thank you, Mohit. I think I do agree the government here is continuously making a significant progress in terms of building the ecosystem, and what the government continues to say is they're not done, there's still so much more to be done in terms of continuing to build this ecosystem, keeping it sustainable as the number of GCCs increase. Phani, one question for you. DRL, like you said, has been here for 40 years in terms of shaping the manufacturing ecosystem, had a significant role to play. Similarly for the research ecosystem. As it comes to the digital ecosystem, what are some of the initiatives that you are leading to ensure that the city continues to have that talent, that mindset? How do you influence that in DRL?
Yeah, I see this as digital obviously has evolved from the time, we've started thinking about IT to now digital, and almost as a business enabler to a value creator. I think there's a big shift that we have seen over the period of time. I think the fellow panelists have talked about a lot of purpose-led value creation gets expedited, when you add digital to the mix. So a lot of these capabilities that are now coming in initially have been seen, at least in other parts of the world, as individual capabilities. But when you actually see it as a part of the value creation, engine, then suddenly there are a lot of new opportunities that have shaped up for us. I've given a couple of examples, but across the value chain, I think we've also had the previous speaker talk about it, but across the value chain, be it from our R&D, early stage, CDMO, CRO work that we do as a part of our subsidiary, Origin.ai, for example, is a product that we have now taken to customers with. For instance, a lot of these places where a combination of data, AI, and digital, purely from an application perspective, when you put them all together, it has a significant value that is getting created as we see it, right? So in terms of capabilities, the core capabilities always have been built up, like I said, the core digital around MES systems, the e-lab notebooks and the likes, which were the core digital infrastructure that started off as a lever for compliance particularly, has now started building up a layer on top of it around data engineering, data pipelining for ML, AI. That evolution is what we're seeing now. But increasingly, the point that I talked about, how do you create that efficiency factor when you think about some of these core functions coupled with digital? I think that is a huge unlocked opportunity as we see it, because if we see them as two different COEs, I have an R&D or a clinical trials or a regulatory COE or a capability, and then I have a tech COE. If you see them as two different ones, there is a value lost in between. But you put them together, you look at what I call as RegTech, look at how generative AI can help us file dossiers in 40 plus countries, as we take a drug to, a lot of emerging markets, for example, or how do you look at, AI for, chemistry, route of synthesis, things like that. I think there is a lot of that value that is getting unlocked for us. Most of our work is essentially in using digital for value creation in these areas, both in terms of R&D, in manufacturing, for example, we have a World Economic Forum certified, digital lighthouse factory here in Hyderabad that serves US and a lot of the global markets. And then as you go further into the commercial value chain, be it in marketing, be it in patient care, patient support, there are tons of opportunities that are opening up for us. And I think this done to death now, but in terms of generative AI and the capability, it's just so exciting suddenly, because we've always been an industry that made more paper, than pills, as we say, because it's just the regulatory compliance and a bunch of other things that just pulls back, in terms of speed and efficiency. Suddenly there is a huge unlock that is possible when you throw digital and AI at it. So a lot of exciting things happening, obviously, in the city and for the industry as I see it.
Indeed. Well, thanks, Phani. Rajiv, I wanted to come back to where you started your conversation. You said, as you think about growing in India, want to ensure you are being intentional about it, being purposeful about it, and not growing just for the sake of numbers, and makes a lot of sense. As you think about this growth, what are some of the challenges that you would see in the ecosystem? You've experienced it. There are a lot of opportunities. We talked about that. What are some of the challenges you see, and how are you trying to risk mitigate those?
I think from a challenge, there are challenges that is part internal to the organization. We are pretty sensitive to not to position these things as a lift and shift. I mean, this is a huge change management aspect to this, right? We want to be sensitive to a lot of those things as well. And more importantly, we also want to nail what we started before we go broad. And I think, and as we go broad, we also want to look at these value multipliers. I think one of the, I'm not sure if it's the same in other things. One thing that we constantly see is, even though we have, teams, different functional teams sitting out of the site, for them to collaborate, we have to make a round trip. And sometimes empowering, these fusion teams to able to accelerate to a common initiative or to a common outcome, I think would make sense, a lot more sense. So how do you, sort of address that challenge without, without diluting on the overall intent of that, right? So internal challenges are obviously there. I mean, talent is obviously a challenge all the time. We are all tapping into the same talent pool in some way or the other. But more importantly, I think it is about once we acquire the talent, how do you institutionalize the regional way of life in our case, so that the job becomes meaningful and it is then has a purpose. Otherwise, it's just a job, and we want to make sure that some of these things we foundationally correct them before we become a big organization. So these are foundational things that we want to sort of address from the get-go.
Makes sense. Thank you, Rajiv. I think I have a few more questions, but I know we are at time. So perhaps I would like to conclude this discussion by saying, this is really an interesting time. Having grown up in India, like most of you have, we always aspire to deliver at a global scale, and not just deliver, but deliver same quality, better quality at a global scale. And very happy to see that the time has come in our lifetime, and yet there is so much to come in the coming few years. We talked about talent, the ecosystem. Everything is really poised to grow in Hyderabad, but not just in Hyderabad, in India in general as well. So very exciting times for us. Thank you all for taking the time, sharing your perspective. Thank you, BioAsia, for this opportunity and this wonderful discussion.
Well, that was an incredibly insightful discussion, I'm sure. A huge thank you to our esteemed panelists and moderator for sharing their expertise. To express our gratitude, may I invite our session sponsor, Agilesian representative Mr. Raj Babu, CEO and founder, onto the stage to present a small token of appreciation to our panelists, please. We'll take a moment over here while we hand over the mementos to our moderator and our panelists. Once again, I take this opportunity and thank our panelists to be a part of this wonderful discussion. And of course, a special mention to our session sponsor, Agilesian, and thank you for doing the honors. Let us capture this moment, so I humbly request our panelists and our guests to please step forward for a group photograph. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Moving forward to our next panel discussion, we now turn